Hello, I'm Ollie and this is Criminally, where I talk about crime, pulp, horror, that kind of thing. Today, a fantastic crime novel, Population 1280 by Jim Thompson. Now, Jim Thompson is an author I've read a few books by over the years. I think probably about 5 or 6. Reading this has really made me want to read more by him. Most of the stuff I read by him, I read when I was in my late teens and early 20s, and hadn't read anything by him more recently. But he's great. He's really, really good. He's a very, very interesting crime writer who gives you a bit more than many crime writers do. And I definitely think he's worth you checking out if you like the sound of this book. So, Thompson wrote from kind of the late 40s through the 50s and 60s. This book came out in 64 and he died, I think, in 1977. And it's only really since his death that he's come to be appreciated in literary circles. So when he was publishing, he was considered to be just another trashy crime writer, basically, from the hard-boiled school, but not writing anything that had lasting merit. And if you look at some of the early covers for Population 1280, they have that pulpy kind of vibe to them. They draw the reader in based on the kind of sex and violence that the books contain. But he's such an interesting writer, and the central character of this book is absolutely fascinating. So the book is about a guy called Nick Cory, who's a sheriff in a small town in a US state around the time of the First World War. And Cory's kind of approach to law enforcement is to do as little as possible. So he rationalises that everyone who lives in the town is doing at least one thing that's illegal. So if he arrested one person, he'd have to arrest everybody. So basically, he just wants an easy life, and his exterior, his kind of the persona he shows to people in the town is this kind of amiable, bumbling guy who'll help people out, but never really takes a stand against anything. As the book progresses, you realise he's actually not bumbling or foolish at all. He's actually very, very shrewd, very smart, and possibly a psychopath who manipulates the people around him in order to get what he wants. And that's what makes him such a fascinating character. The book is narrated by him, so you get to see his inner thoughts on things. But even then, it's almost like he's deluding himself. It's almost like he believes himself to be this bumbling person that he shows to the world. He hides his kind of inner intelligence even from himself. But you see it when he's confronting other people in the town. One of the things you see a lot of in this book is bigotry, and you might expect that in a book set around the time of the First World War in a small US southern town. Yeah. There's a lot of racism. The black population of the town are treated appallingly by the white people in the town. But Cory has a way of kind of turning people's arguments against them in a way that they don't even realise at the time. And he, at multiple points in the book, ends up somehow kind of doing the right thing and fooling other people into doing the right thing, despite the bigotry that they portray, which I thought was absolutely fascinating. One of the really interesting things about this book as well is its kind of reflection on politics. So one of the subplots of the book is the fact that the town is about to vote to see who will be the mayor, to see who will be the sheriff, to see if Nick will be re-elected as sheriff. And there's another guy who's going up against him, who in basically every single way is a better candidate. And Cory uses his kind of shrewdness and his ability to manipulate people to change the results of the election, or try and influence the results of the election. And he does it in a really, really interesting way. He constantly comes across as this kind of foolish, bumbling character, but manages to get inside people's psyches and speak to something inside them that they kind of can't resist. And I think if this book were published today, I think people will be saying Nick Cory is kind of is based on some of the populist politicians we've seen recently in the UK and the US, like Trump and Boris Johnson, who have that kind of very amiable persona where they appear to be not very intelligent, but actually when you examine what they're doing, they're incredibly shrewd, and constantly manipulating the people around them to get what they want. So I think Cory is a really fascinating character because of that. And Thompson is one of those writers who really gets inside the minds of his characters and shows you, it's like he completely immerses himself in this character, and you really get to know Nick Cory as a person. You get to understand, his drives and why he's doing things, even when he doesn't necessarily understand them himself. I think there's a real talent from a writer to be able to do that. So I really do recommend this book. It's packed with sex and violence as well as, the kind of more philosophical side of things. But it's absolutely fascinating. It's a great hard-boiled read, but it's also, as I said, got something a little bit extra. And I think Thompson is that style of writer I really like, in that he's a genre writer first and foremost. So he was a crime writer. He made no bones about being a crime writer. But he injects his books with such thoughtfulness and like weird little twists and things like that you wouldn't necessarily expect. So this book and another book I've read by him, The Getaway, both have endings that turn the whole of the book on its head, that just leave you thinking about the book for days and weeks afterwards. This one definitely does, and The Getaway does as well. That's another fantastic book by him. So he's a writer that came out of the crime genre, but managed to add a little something extra on top. And I think that's why he's become to be such a respected author since his death. I much prefer this style of author rather than somebody who considers himself to be a literary author, someone who writes, kind of pretentious modern literary type books that might get, nominated for the Booker Prize or something like that, who then plays around with writing genre fiction. I think that rarely works. It always feels a little bit false. Whereas someone who loves genre fiction, who has kind of risen up through the ranks of, the kind of pulp writers like Thompson did, I think works much better. And this is a fantastic example of that kind of book. So I hope you found that interesting. Let me know if you've read Jim Thompson and what you think of him. And as always, thanks very much for watching. I hope you're safe and well out there. Hope you're reading good stuff. And I'll speak to you again very soon. Cheerio.